Ever feel like planning for retirement is like, uh, well, like throwing darts blindfolded?
I know what you mean. It can definitely feel that way sometimes.
We're diving into something today that adds like a whole new layer to risk, ergodicity. And after digging into the articles you sent, I gotta say, I'm kind of feeling like I should known about this all along.
It's one of those concepts that once you wrap your head around it, it really changes how you view things.
Totally.
Let's do it. Ergodicity, it can be a bit of a brain twister, but it's crucial for making, smart financial decisions, especially when we're talking about retirement.
Okay, so the first article throws us right into a casino, which, let's be honest, always makes things a bit more interesting. They describe this scenario with 100 people, each starting with $1,000, all using the same kind of risky strategy. What's a thought experiment here?
So this scenario, what it really does is highlight the difference between what the article calls ensemble probability and time probability. It's like,
Wow.
imagine the difference between taking a group snapshot versus watching a video play out.
Okay, so the group snapshot is like, what are the odds for everyone right at that single moment?
Exactly. You nailed it. That in this casino example they use, at any given time, like 99 out of those 100 people are probably winning a 99% chance of success. Sounds pretty tempting, right?
Yeah, someone offered me those odds, I'd be at the blackjack table right now.
But
Eh.
there's always a but, isn't there? The strategy, it also has this like 1% chance of you losing everything, wiping out your stake every time you play.
So there's the catch. So
Yeah.
we've got one very unlucky person who's out of the game while everyone else is celebrating.
Exactly. And this is where that time probability, the video version, comes in. You see, the article then says, imagine it's just one person going to the casino for 100 days straight. That's where ergodicity, or rather the lack of it, really comes into play.
Okay, so you're saying, like, the odds look amazing if you're just glancing at the whole group all at once. But if it's just you playing over and over and over again.
Precisely. Your own personal experience could be totally different from what that group average might suggest. And that's what the article is trying to get at in many real-life scenarios. Like when we're investing for retirement, what happens to a group over a short period doesn't always reflect what might happen to you over a much longer time.
So even if an investment looks great on paper because of the average return, my own experience might not be so rosy.
You hit the nail on the head. And that's why this whole ergodicity concept, it's so important for something as long-term as retirement planning. We rely so much on those average returns, but we often forget that those averages, well, they play out over time, and not always in a way we can predict.
Okay, I'm starting to see why getting this whole ensemble probability versus time probability thing is a pretty big deal.
Think of it this way. It's kind of like the difference between looking at a map of a city and actually walking through its streets. The map gives you the big picture, but the journey itself, well, let's just say it's bound to have a few surprises along the way.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so the article goes on to call applying this kind of groupthink to our own personal finances, playing Russian roulette with your money. That's a pretty intense comparison, makes you think.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention, doesn't it?
Mhm.
But it highlights just how important it is to think about these things carefully. We don't want to gamble with our futures if we can help it.
So how does, like, this whole ergodicity thing, how does it actually play out when we're talking about investing, in the real world?
Well, they bring up a really common retirement planning tool, something you've probably come across,
Yep.
the safe withdrawal rate. A lot of times, that's based on those historical average returns we were just talking about.
Right. The idea is you can take out a certain percentage every year from your retirement savings, and you're not going to run out of money.
Exactly.
Huh?
But what this article does is it uses this fictional couple, Nick and Nancy, to show how that safe rate, it might not be so safe after all in a non-ergodic system.
Okay, so walk me through Nick and Nancy's situation here.
So picture this. They've done everything right, saved diligently their whole lives, got a nice little nest egg. We're talking $3 million. They're ready to retire, finally enjoy life, right?
Sounds like they're living the dream.
They think so too. They decide to use that classic 4% safe withdrawal rate with $3 million. They figure they're all set, right?
Yeah, that seems pretty solid to me. What could go wrong?
Well, the problem is that 4% rule, it's relying on this assumption that market returns are going to be, consistent. Remember our casino example from earlier?
Oh, right, yeah.
In the real world, the order those returns actually happen in, That can make a huge EE difference.
Hold on, let me get this straight. So even if the average return over, say, 30 years is technically enough to support that 4% withdrawal if the market's all over the place during that time, it's not actually safe.
You got it. And they actually use the Dow Jones Industrial Average, real data, from 1966 to 1997 to really drive this point home.
So you're telling me even with decent average returns like the Dow Jones back then, things could still go totally sideways for someone like Nick and Nancy?
Unfortunately, yeah. From 1966 to 1997, the Dow Jones averaged an 8% return, which sounds pretty good. But here's the thing. From 1966 to 1982, it basically went nowhere. Started and ended at roughly the same level. Then, from 82 to 97, it just like exploded, growing at over 15% per year.
Whoa, talk about a wild ride. So even though the average looks great when you just look at the numbers,
The timing of those returns, it could make or break Nick and Nancy. If they'd retired, say, at the start of that flat period in 66, those low returns early on, they could have really eaten away at their savings, even with the market booming later.
it's like their money runs out right before things get good.
That's it. And that's the real danger of relying only on those average returns. We got to consider the sequence of events, too. It's like
Yeah.
you wouldn't assume you're going to win at roulette every time just because the odds are in your favor in the long run.
Okay, all of this, it's definitely making me rethink my own retirement plan. This whole time, it's like this hidden risk nobody talks about.
It's something a lot of people just aren't aware of. But that's why getting a handle on this ergodicity thing, it's so important. It helps you look beyond just the average returns and actually plan for things, well, not going exactly according to plan.
So what are we supposed to do? Just panic and stuff all our cash under the mattress? I mean, I'm not running to the bank just yet, but it's definitely given me something to think about. Seriously, though, what are we supposed to do with this information? Should we just toss out our whole retirement plan and start over?
I don't think we need to get that drastic. That's a really good question, and I know a lot of people listening are probably wondering the same thing. The good news is, understanding this whole ergodicity idea, it isn't about hitting the panic button. It's about, empowering ourselves with the knowledge.
So more like adjusting our strategy instead of jumping ship completely.
Exactly. We need to acknowledge that those traditional models, they have limitations. We have to adapt our approach if we really want to match, the reality of this non-ergodic system we're dealing with.
So if those early years of retirement, those are like the riskiest when it comes to this sequence risk thing, how can people adapt to that? What can they actually do?
One thing you can do is be a bit more conservative with how much you're withdrawing in those early years, especially if you happen to retire during a time when the market is being a bit, volatile. It's kind of like building a safety net into your plan.
So instead of taking out that full 4% right away, maybe you take out a little less at first, just to be on the safe side.
Exactly. You want to give yourself a little breathing room, especially in those early years. A couple of bad years in the market, that can really throw things off if you aren't careful.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there any other strategies people could look into?
Definitely. Another approach is to really prioritize those investments that generate a consistent income stream. Things like high-quality dividend stocks or bonds, they can be a good option.
Oh, so you're kind of creating your own safe withdrawal rate in a way.
Yeah, you could say that. It's all about diversifying those income streams instead of relying solely on selling off assets, especially when the market might not be doing so hot.
This has been, I gotta say, a really eye-opening conversation. It's like one of those things, once you understand ergodicity, you can't unsee it. It really makes you stop and think about all that traditional investing advice we hear all the time.
It definitely challenges us to think differently about risk, that's for sure, and how we plan for the future. I think the biggest takeaway for everyone listening is, don't just blindly follow those average returns. Be mindful of the sequence of returns when they happen matters. And definitely think about adjusting your strategy accordingly, especially with those early retirement years in mind.
Words to live by. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a lot to digest, but incredibly helpful.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
And to everyone listening, remember, stay informed, stay adaptable, and never stop asking questions. Because as we learned today, a little healthy skepticism can be a good thing, especially when it comes to planning for your future. We'll catch you next time.